My name is Tony Lett. I'm the general manager of Fred Bean's Kia in Langhorne. I just wanted to take a minute to talk about Larry Feldman and Career Changers USA. Larry and I have been working together for about the last 12 years now, and anything I've ever needed as far as recruiting, training, Larry has been right there. Larry's got me salespeople, he's got me managers, he's got me technicians even through the toughest times in the industry, and he is just the kind of guy who's going to tell you exactly what's on his mind. He's going to tell you exactly what he thinks. But Larry also has the expertise to back it up. When he was in the dealership world, he was a top performer, and that's really important to my staff, especially as it pertains to training. A lot of people can come in and teach out of a textbook, but Larry has real-world experience dealing with customers, dealing with situations in dealerships that we go through on a daily basis and try to train on. But Larry's been through it, so he can really empathize with the people and tell you what's worked for him and maybe what way not to go. Larry is just always at a 10. I mean, his energy level is always up there, and I think people, they just love that and they feed off of it. He's not faking it. He is genuinely excited to come in and help you. He's excited to come in and help grow your business. And he's one of those people who just really enjoys seeing dealers succeed and have a lot of fun at the same time.
All right. Life is about connection. Having a support system to lean on. And roads to endless possibility. At every turn, guiding the way, we are building the connections that move you.
So what would your dealership feel like if your entire sales staff was literally on fire, your sales and service staff? They were nonstop all over social media, completely dominating your marketplace. They could do it in 30 days or less and then continue their education to do it for an entire 6 months or a year. You literally would completely take over the entire marketplace and no one would be able to compete with you. And that's what we can do for you. So when you're walking around your community, whether you're at local restaurants or you're going to the gym, if you don't want to be bothered, fine, you won't be bothered. But a lot of people will walk up to you and say, oh my God, I love your social media. Your staff is amazing. We love what you're doing in the community. We want to come buy a car from you. We want to get an oil change at your dealership. Your community is absolutely going to love you. And it doesn't matter what platform you're on. You could be on TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all social media platforms. You will literally be all over the place. And not only will you have ads running, but your own staff is going to be promoting your brand and promoting themselves within the dealership and within the business. So it's like running an ad times 100-fold because your entire staff is participating in the process. I've traveled all over North America. I've trained Toyota. I've trained Nissan. I've been to driving sales. I've been to Women in Auto. I get hired as a speaker for conferences at universities all over the country. And I can help change the trajectory of your dealership right now.
Hey, if you missed us live, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcast.
This is Ian from the AutoHub Show. I'm here at ASOTU here in beautiful Hanover, Maryland, near Baltimore, just in case you're not familiar. This is my first ASOTU. I'm very familiar with the event, and I'm here with Larry Feldman, obviously, as always, one of our sponsors, but also I got two wonderful guests here to talk about their company and what they do, because the show, as always, is not about me, it's about other people. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll go from there. Go ahead.
My name is Derek Garber. I'm Vice President with Haig Partners, and we are a national advisor to dealers who are looking to buy or sell their dealerships.
Oh, okay. So the big transactions.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, sometimes we get a rap that we only work on big transactions, but really, I mean, it's really majority of the dealerships in the country we'll work with.
Oh, okay. So it could be like a motorcycle dealer, a boat dealer.
No, not as much. Mainly on the auto, RV, or heavy truck side. And really our sweet spot is anywhere between 20 million and $1 billion transaction.
So the really big money.
Yeah.
That is right, yeah. And I'm Jason Crouch. I'm managing director at Haig Partners out of Denver.
Okay.
So
And what do you do?
basically the same thing. Yeah, we were out consulting with the dealerships, dealer owners across the country, helping them basically look to optimize their portfolio or exit the business if that's their choice at the time.
Right.
And so we put together the buyer and the seller and help proceed the transaction.
So from a point of view of acquisition, whether it's a small dealer group buying more stores or whether it's maybe a mom and pop store who maybe is looking to get out because either their kid doesn't want it or maybe they don't have children, what's your advice to them in terms of, what's the best advice from a point of view when they should sell or how they do that? What do you think?
It's a highly personal decision. Everyone has their own reasons. We don't necessarily push anyone in any particular direction. We help them basically just make the decision when it's right for them is probably the best advice we would say. So usually when they're contacting us or it's maybe a few years out, we'll give them ideas about what it might look like to exit. What are some of the things that they want to take care of now versus later. But really we're there to show them that we know what we're doing in the business. We can help them proceed with the transaction, but ultimately the decision has to rely with them.
Understood. I come from a family history in the car business. My grandfather had a number of stores. My cousin still owns a store. At one point, I think we owned 5 rooftops, including a Volkswagen store, a Honda store, different stores. But when you're looking at it, and it's interesting because my grandfather started the stores and my uncle and then my cousin, I've been in the business myself. When you're looking at that and you have, let's just say you have 2 children and they don't want to do it for whatever reason, what's your advice to them as to when they should do that? I mean, I've seen dealers that are 80 still running stores. I mean, what's your thought there?
And really, what I was going to add to that last question as well is that the decision to sell is almost never financial.
Right.
It is an emotional decision. There's very little asset classes out there that can beat the returns of a dealership. That's why our industry is so beautiful.
Right.
And the decision comes down to, am I emotionally done with this business? Have I completed my legacy? Have I done what I've gone out to do? Set my goals. And when it's different for everyone. Look at guys like Roger Penske.
Yeah.
I mean, that man's gonna work until it's over. And then you've got other people that, they have different goals and different strategies for the end of their life, and they want to spend more time with their kids, their grandkids, experience traveling, because working in the dealerships, they're there 6-7 days a week, and that's their baby, that's their life. And, sometimes you reach that point where, the money's great and the success is great, but you want to enjoy some other things.
Understood. I mean, it was funny. I had the opportunity last year to meet a famous person where I used to live. He owns 18 stores and employs about 60,000 people, but he started in the car business. He's 94, still works, to your point, 7 days a week. I'm not sure if his kids are going to be in the car side of his business. He owns multiple businesses, but the question I had was around dealerships that maybe just sell the business but not the land versus selling the entire kit and caboodle. What's your advice there? What's your thoughts?
So it's an interesting one. We have been seeing that strategy start to take off a little bit. People participating in the sale leasebacks, and it is a good option for some people. But they do have to realize it does hurt them on the exit. In acquisitions, dealers want to own the real estate. They've seen the value increase on the real estate side over this past 10, 20, 30 years. And sometimes it's just as large as the blue sky, the gains on the real estate. And also with all the OEM requirements of constant renovation, image requirements, you don't want to be investing all that money into someone else's business if you're acquiring a new store. So it's, leased property does add some complexity to a transaction.
So your advice would be to not do that ideally?
It depends. If you're looking to expand and grow and there's no other option for you other than you've got 4 dealerships you're looking at an acquisition opportunity of 4 more, and you don't have the capital to do it, then a sale leaseback does work very well for that.
Right.
It's just 10, 20 years down the road when you go and sell it, it does add some complexity. But if you can get the gains in creating more income, then it offsets that.
And in terms of, let's just say I'm a young individual and I want to get into the car business, and maybe I don't have a family history, what we like to call PhD, Papa has dealership background. What's your advice to someone who, say, just wants to start with one store? Like, do you handle those kind of transactions?
We do. We have buyers that are obviously entering. They're either high-performing GMs somewhere that are trying to find their first store, and it's much tougher today than it was 20 years ago to make that transition and buy out an owner or buy your first store. But we do see opportunities for folks to get in the business, as Derek was mentioning. The sale leaseback piece. So if you're a seller and you're holding on to the real estate, that does hurt the transaction a bit. But you can negotiate something up front if that particular buyer needs help acquiring it. You can say, okay, I'm going to set it up as a lease for the first 5 years. We'll settle today on a price, and then there's a terminal, lease where we're going to buy it at a set price at a time, and that helps the buyer acquire. Some of the other things that we've seen, obviously, is the bank lending, some capital injection from equity, maybe partners. And then there's some of the F&I programs out there that allow you to advance against future contracts that you're selling, right? And so there's ways to bootstrap a dealership opportunity for a first-time buyer. It's still significant from the equity injection, but there are opportunities, and we do work with those buyers in certain transactions.
So are there certain OEMs that you'd recommend those type of buyers look at as sort of, maybe an easier starting point versus other OEMs? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, everybody wants to go. I guess the saying I heard yesterday was everybody wants to go to Plano, right, and talk to Plano. So we know that they're talking about Toyota, right? Yeah. And it's like, that's a fantastic franchise, of course. There's probably less expensive franchises out there. But even with that, I mean, Toyota's got some fantastic programs too, where if you're a high-level, high-performing GM, and you raise your hand and the region leadership knows you, they will sponsor you into a program. They've got investment arms that will help dealers get into programs. I know there was a Lexus dealer out in LA that used a Toyota Lexus dealer investment arm, ended up working through the transaction within like 5 years on a very high-value store. So it's really about, I think all of the different OEMs have programs to identify top talent that's already in their network, that already knows their leadership team, knows how to operate, and then kind of get them into an ownership scenario. So my advice to those people would be really to work with your regional sales teams on the factory side and make sure that they know what your intentions are, and get sponsorship from your owner, of course.
Right. So what about on the funding side? So let's just say, for example, I own dealerships already. I wanted to add, maybe 2-3 more dealerships. Do you guys help on that side? Do you have connections on that side to help that dealer? Maybe if you need some bridge financing or something to that effect?
Yeah, well, we do have connections. We work with a lot of the, really family office private equity firms that are in our space right now. And it's more on the equity side. So, so if someone wants to sell 30% of their business for an injection of capital, we have the connections and we'll help sell that equity portion.
And what about dealers, thanks for that, what about dealers who are, say, looking at buying stores in other countries, say, for example, Mexico, Canada, Europe? I've seen a lot of lately, as we've seen dealers look for properties that maybe they can't find in their market. Or one of the groups, I think it's Foundation Auto, has been doing the reverse. So they started in the Canadian market, and then they moved to the U.S., and now they're buying everywhere in different areas. I mean, what's your advice for those dealers who maybe want to grow outside of the borders of the United States?
So the United States is a lot for our firm to handle at this point. We've got 17,000 dealerships here. Yeah. It keeps us pretty busy. And the market dynamics are so different state to state. I couldn't even imagine international. We have not at this point handled any international transactions. That could be in the future, but we've not done that yet.
Understand. So I guess the other question on the retail piece, do you ever handle any, say, a new car franchise who wants to buy, say, large used car dealers? Do you ever do any of that?
I have not. I don't know if Derek has that transaction in his pocket, but so far I have not seen a new car franchise look to buy a used only lot. Now, in the last, 4 or 5 years, the used only model has been under a lot of pressure. So that's probably driving the lack of interest in that. But I don't know if maybe prior to the last 5 years, if there was a transaction, we've got some experience.
I know that there's The only one I heard of is actually New Car up in the Northeast. They just acquired a used car store up in New Hampshire. I wouldn't say it's common practice because you can expand the used car operations at your new dealership.
Fair enough.
And you've got OEM support now behind it. So, I don't, there could be benefits, but it's not common.
So what about that dealer who say wants to be a used car dealer, but like let's just say picks Mitsubishi as a brand or Kia as a brand and wants to get into say like subprime and used? Is that advice that you would give them, or where would you say there?
Yeah, so there's brands like Mitsubishi is a great example. I mean, Mitsubishi stores across the country. If you're not a used dealer with a Mitsubishi franchise, you're losing money.
Right.
That OEM you cannot sell enough new vehicles to be profitable. So most of those dealerships, when we see them, they're 3-to-1, 4-to-1 used to new ratio.
Yeah.
And really, that's actually one of our the best ways to get into the new franchise side. If you're a great used car dealer, add Mitsubishi to the mix. They're not a high multiple and be able to acquire them. The OEM image requirements are not at the level of the other OEMs. And now you've got the financing and the support behind you. Show you have great sales effectiveness. Prove you can be a good new car dealer. Expand from there.
Fantastic.
You're right. It was funny. I was just having a conversation in California with a dealer that did exactly that. Had a very successful used only and said he wanted to get the new car franchise so he could be part of the new car world and kind of grow. So he bought a Mitsubishi store. So he goes, and I was a new car franchise owner. And I says, yeah, but what, I'm sure you were still like in the used car business. He goes, I was 7-to-1.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to work with a multiple rooftop new car franchise years ago, and they had a Mitsubishi store as part of their group. And I think the target was 7 new Mitsubishis a month was their actual target. And I'm just like, 7 cars? They're like, yeah, well, we really sell a lot of used cars. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get that. But it's kind of interesting as you look at sort of the movement from dealers who might want to acquire, say, a motorcycle franchise, or they want to acquire like a boat franchise or marine sports or other things. Do you do any work in someone who maybe has those mix in their
Yeah, we have sold groups before that have had, kind of those one-off, different non-auto franchises with it. It actually is a good strategy. Actually, here, I believe Rick Reichert's here.
Yeah.
And they're a great example of a group that has done that. They've got almost every OEM within their region on the domestic and import side. And then they figured, we have the data, we have the customer base. Why not pick up some extra income on the hobby side?
Right.
Buy some power sports dealerships, and the guy who's buying the Harley Davidson F-150 probably wants a motorcycle.
Absolutely.
And so it's perfect. It's a great bolt-on business.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you look at things like, whether it be Honda or Harley Davidson or other. But I think the other thing that's kind of interesting when you look at acquisition is you're seeing groups, for example, consolidating into one building, like in big urban markets, where they're saying, okay, I had 10 stores, now I'm just going to build a building and have the 10 stores in one location, whether it be the commercial tower or a condo tower I've even seen. What's your thought on the big footprint dealers in big urban markets? Do you think those have got a future, or do you think you're going to see more consolidation like that?
I think there's going to be more of that. There's a couple different projects, like I'm in the West Coast, and so I'm from Southern California, so I know a lot of the dealers that try to operate in a very high per square foot cost market, and it's very tough. There's a lot of, outside of some of the development controls that the cities have, around what you can and can't do, it's just the cost per square foot, and then in a normal automotive market, how many cars do you really need to sell to cash flow that building, or any image requirements from the factory. So we've seen folks take away the parts and service and move it, somewhere within their PMA, but that's acceptable, but like somewhere off site, and then create like a retail residential project, things like this that are, to try to offset some of those costs. I think there's one in Northern California, there's a project in Southern California. I know that there was one in the East Coast. I think it might have been Manhattan. I'm not sure where that's at this point, but I know it's been experimented with multiple times, and I do think that there's a future there at some point. We're just waiting to see like the right model hit. But I do think that some of the very large, 20-acre parking lot style. I think that's going to end up going away over time in some of the urban areas.
Yeah, because when you look at the inventory and the inventory costs, especially these days, but also the storage requirements. I mean, when you look at England as a market, to give you a comparison, I mean, most of those dealers, they don't inventory cars, they order them. And the manufacturer inventories those in terms of has them in their lot. Do you see that as something that is going to change as we see higher interest rates?
We hope the manufacturer, because we have learned through the pandemic that less is more. The less amount of cars you have on your lot, the more profit you'll have selling those cars. Yeah. So we hope the manufacturers have learned some sort of lesson. The last 6 months have not proved that. You're seeing brands like Nissan and Stellantis and Ford. The day supply is climbing at an alarming rate. Then you have brands like Honda that are still restricted, but their profit margins are still great. So it's we know we've learned the lesson. It's just will the OEMs be willing to not grab market share to overproduce? And we can only hope that they'll have learned something from it, and hopefully inventory will be less on dealers' lots. And the other thing about consolidating into smaller dealerships is it may be a requirement in the future, because if real estate continues on the trend it has, the price of real estate and construction is unbelievable, and the burden it puts on the store. I mean, you have now, for example, the new Kia Image. Yeah, it's costing dealers $6-7 million. The Genesis standalone is costing $10-11 million. The amount of units you have to sell to make up these costs are pretty significant. So if we can consolidate and reduce the cost of this real estate, it'll help the stores be more profitable.
You mean tiles don't sell cars?
Nah, maybe not. I mean, we just sold Al Hendrickson Toyota about a year ago, and that dealership really hadn't been touched in form of renovation since the 90s, and that was the number 2 volume Toyota store in the country.
I've always heard that joke, right? Of like, hey, if you change the color of the flooring, you'll get 4 more units out a month.
And what's your thought on new brands in the market, like, not Fisker, obviously, because there's some challenges there, but I'm sure some dealers have gotten a franchise there, but also groups like VinFast. Have you had any conversations with them about selling dealers in the U.S. market?
So I have not had direct conversations with them about that particular business model, but there has been discussions about them partnering with dealers in the U.S. And going through a franchise dealer model. I don't know if that's going to be a multi-prong approach where there's some direct and some franchise model, or if it's all franchise model. But I think we've already seen that the franchise network does add a significant value to the customer's experience and support. So I see that as a much more viable future solution, and I can see VinFast taking that route, similar to what Fisker did. But unfortunately, Fisker did that at the last minute, and I think it was a little bit too far gone.
And what's your thought on sort of dealers maybe, or manufacturers maybe owning some locations more like a pilot location to see, how they can innovate in the market and retail? What is your thought there?
I think that's a challenge, and I think there's been some OEMs who have tried that, and it didn't work out so well. I think Ford was one of them that had some of their own franchises, and it didn't go so well. I think it's best to continue down the road that we're in. I'm a big proponent of like what California did with the new AB 473, I think it is, that passed, that shows that like you can't launch anything from a factory perspective and compete with the franchise dealers. So they were targeting Volkswagen Scout, they were targeting the Honda partnership, things like that. I think it has to be that the factory's the factory and the network's the network. I think Toyota's got the most direct commitment. You've got Jack Hollis out there flat saying we're going to grow with our network, not around them, and I think that adds significant trust and value to the franchises.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you bring that up because, Honda's made some movements on the profit margin per vehicle, both in the Canadian market and the U.S. market. And I talked to Mr. Benstock briefly yesterday when he was coming in about it, because I've talked to a bunch of dealers in the Canadian market about it, where they basically reduced overall front-end revenue by 55% and didn't talk to the dealers first. And in the U.S., they've done a little bit less than that, but there's obviously lawsuits about it. But the question for from me to dealers that when I talked to them about it was, well, what was the justification? They said electric vehicles. That was what their argument was, which was kind of interesting. But at the end of the day, I think you're going to see an evolution of that model when it comes to real estate, when it comes to flooring, when it comes to profitability and probably service. Do you see dealerships of the future being a lot different in terms of how they look in, say, 10 years, 15 years?
I mean, I would imagine they would continue reducing in size and becoming more efficient. I would like to see more of that space go to the fixed op side. I mean, because we're still crunched on space there. That's a highly profitable side of the business that can keep expanding. But, really, I mean, for the consumer, I think it's worked out pretty well. You have a showroom to display the products. You have your waiting area for service. And you've got your service bays in the back, and I think, it's hard to guess what it'll be, but I can imagine that it's going to stay pretty similar for at least the next 10 years. Yeah.
And what do you think on merchandising? Like, I see some brands, whether it be Porsche or some Cadillac stores, other ones, getting more into selling branded merchandise and other merchandise. Do you see that as a trend to sort of increase revenue per square foot for dealers who maybe have a big store and have a high cost and maybe want to drive revenue?
I think that could be small incremental. I think that's more about customer loyalty retention in terms of the lifestyle. You know what I mean? It kind of blends into their lifestyle. I don't know the margins on those products, but I don't necessarily see them as something that's really going to offset, large costs in terms of the dealer operation. I think to Derek's point, the fixed ops is where that is. And
so not everyone can be Harley Davidson then?
I don't think so. Yeah.
Fair enough. I think Harley Davidson, about half the revenue generated is generated by accessories and branded merchandise.
It's interesting for Harley, that OEM, is that they allow you to open up satellite stores of retail only in your region. So you can open up 3, 4, 5 stores. You're in a tourist destination. You could do pretty well with that.
Yeah, I think in Las Vegas, one of the local Harley stores has one in a couple of the malls, just selling gear. And the gear, having worked with a couple of Harley owners over the years, they change that gear all the time. Like T-shirts have a very short lifespan, for example, and they even have like baby clothing and stuff, which is kind of crazy. Any final thoughts?
I think that we have an excellent industry. Obviously, it's a huge return on investment that we're seeing. I think we're going to continue to see consolidation both in the public and private sectors, a lot of scale still out there. But I think if you're looking to buy additional or optimized portfolios, or if you're entering as a first-time owner, I think it's still a very fantastic industry. I think there's a lot of protections that we've seen here, a lot of innovation coming in terms of all the different tech that we're seeing. I think it's just a fantastic industry to be in.
So how would they get started if they wanted to, say, reach out to you guys and look at buying a store? Like, what does that process look like?
We have an investor database that's on our website. You would just go to haigpartners.com and log in and just kind of give us your information and check in with one of us. The unique thing about our business model is we don't market, like we don't post a sign or anything on our website that something's for sale. Everything's very, very behind the scenes. And so if we don't have a record of who you are or what you're interested in where, we probably won't reach out to you because we just won't know that you're on the radar. So definitely get on our website, log into our investor database, let us know what you're looking for, and then we know like who's where and what part of the market.
So no TikTok videos on dealers for sale?
No, we don't do those.
Not yet.
No wavy people in front of stores.
Maybe for the next gen, we'll maybe I'll start that marketing for us. But you can always reach out direct. We post our cell phones right on our websites. I'm Derek at Haig Partners. Cell phones 407-949-2549. I love having conversations about the industry. Both Jayson and I participate in writing the Haig Report every quarter. So we love talking to dealers and industry professionals, gathering information every day. It's part of our job.
And what kind of time frame, if like I was looking to buy a dealership, what kind of time frame from like start to close on those kind of deals?
So from the time you make an offer to closing, it could take probably about 4 months.
Okay.
4 to 5 months.
Depending on owners and those kind of things.
It depends how tough you are as a buyer, how much negotiations have to happen.
You mean negotiations in the car business on purchases, really?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it. And there'll be more details in the description below. And hello again from ASOTU. Bye for now.
Hey, if you miss us live, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcast.